I'm joined by Rob Chen, a New York actor working in theatre, film, and music. As a graduate from the Stella Adler Studio of Acting, he has gone on to be part of sketch comedies, co-hosts a podcast, has his own music projects, has appeared on shows such as Law and Order, as well as acting in Boston's production of the play Viet Gone and the film Secret Lives of Asians at Night. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Rob.
Hey, no, thank you for Megan for being here. Thank you, MOCA, Museum of Chinese America, for having me. You guys are awesome. So yeah, I can't wait to do this. How's it going, by the way?
I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
Swell. Swell is a good word to use in this case for me. So yeah, swell.
Fantastic. So to start, I would love to learn a little bit more. And if you could tell me a little bit about your background and your work in the entertainment industry.
So my background, at least with entertainment, was that I actually studied business in college. I went to Northeastern University, and for me, it was a little bit more of a practical thing to do. But I always knew I liked the arts. I always knew I liked to perform. I was performing in high school, and that's kind of where I found my voice in a way, in terms of wow, like this is what acting, not just acting, but music production, poetry, writing, how that helps me in my own life. So, but it was a little tricky. When you go to college, you're like, okay, now I got to figure out what I need to do with my life. So I decided to be a business student. And at my school at Northeastern, we have this program called a co-op. So instead of going to school, you end up working full time for 6 months at a time for a real company. So by the time you graduate, you have like at least 1 year's worth of work experience. So it's good for me. So now I know what I like and what I don't like. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this corporate business routes for the rest of my life. I couldn't see myself contributing positively to my community as well as to my society. So what happened was that my senior year, I took this class called the Asian American Experience class. And it was like the one and only Asian American studies class that we have. And uh, I thought I knew what I was talking about. I thought I knew my shit. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm Asian American. I'm very proud. I've always been proud and outspoken. I think I know my culture and my people well, but that class definitely schooled me. And I'm so glad that it did. And it was my favorite class that I've ever taken in my entire college academic career. So, what that taught me was that it taught me that, oh, wow, there's so many stories I didn't know. Why aren't they told? How do I tell it? So I had to find what works for me. And I was like, you know what? I know that I love storytelling, I love art, I love performing. So let's go in that route. And through that, I'll be able to tell my people's history and stories that way. So I started off with acting right after I graduated from business school. I enrolled at Stella Adler for a conservatory program. It was like a year and a half. Went through that. The training was amazing. Got to meet people from all over the world. And then I just kept acting and just auditioned and auditioned and auditioned. The life of an actor is pretty tough in the sense of like you never know what to expect. But I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I have had, as well as what I have seen as well in the industry and how they do treat certain people, whether it's women, people in the LGBT community, whether you're Black, Asian, they will have a certain typecast for you. So it's about learning how to adjust yourself to break out of that mold and find your own unique voice in this greater space of entertainment. And after a while, it's like, okay, you start to figure out who you are, why you're doing this. And the hope is that you're doing it for the right reasons. So aside from acting, I also do music because acting for somebody else's writing is one thing, but music enabled me to pull from different emotions and experiences. And I would co-direct it and produce it with one of my good friends from Brooklyn. And all of our music videos are like pretty much like the entire cast is either Asian or the entire crew is Asian Americans. And I make it a point to do that too, because I think it's important that as an artist, you're able to find your tribe and a community of artists that you can support you and that you share the same vision with. So everybody there is from Brooklyn. That's where I'm from as well. So it's been a whole journey and a whole wild ride, but I'm very grateful to number one, be alive, and number two, that my family is all healthy because we're still technically still in a pandemic. So I'm just grateful for all those opportunities, and yeah, I couldn't be happier. So mom, dad, if you're listening, what's good, guys? Hey, how's it going? Love you guys. Hey. So yeah.
So, what was your childhood like growing up in New York City?
Mm, that's a very broad question. But it was very interesting because going through public school. Well, so I grew up in New York, and then I went to boarding school afterwards. But a lot of my formative years, I think what really shaped how I looked at the world was in those years when I was in New York for sure, because we had kids from all over the world, all over the country. And I was like in first grade, second grade. There's a lot of immigrants in my class, and we're all just a bunch of immigrants. Like my parents, they came from China, like southern China, so Guangzhou area. They immigrated to the US, and then I was born in Queens. And you just get a wide variety of different folks. Like my neighbors were from Venezuela, and some of my other classmates, one of them could be from Thailand, another one could be from China, another one could be from Poland, Russia, Italy. So you get a whole mix of people. I was also there when 9/11 happened. So that experience definitely shapes how I view the world too, because I will never forget that moment in terms of what that day felt like when I just started second grade. Um, but also just seeing how, like, at least like growing up in the city, there was this sense of like, wow, the city's huge, right? And you do have to watch where you're going, but it's also very diverse. But the idea of like New York being a cultural melting pot is a little bit skewed because it's less of a cultural melting pot because there's a lot of pockets of communities, and you might not always see them interact with one another. Like if you're in Chinatown, there are some people who just stay in Chinatown. And my dad works in the Brooklyn Chinatown. My mom works in the Chinatown in Manhattan. And I remember very distinctly whenever we walk past, whenever we walk to her work, I used to volunteer and help her out. And we would always pass by this detention center. It's like this police facility. And when I was a kid, it used to scare me because it was like really big and like really dark and gray. And my mom would be like, "Hey, do you know why there's this detention center in Chinatown?" Well, it's because every other community said no to this. The Jewish community said, "We don't want this built in our community." They voted, so they said no. The Italian community voted, they raised their concerns. The Black community voted, they raised their concerns. The Chinese community did not participate. We did not vote, we did not raise our voices. And therefore, this big thing is located smack down in the middle of Chinatown. And I was maybe like 8 years old hearing that. And what that big lesson for me was to really raise your voice. And if you see something that's not fair, say something. Like if there's injustice, as we see even during the pandemic, talk about it, be aware of it, keep learning, but then don't be afraid to use your voice to speak out against these injustices. So that was a huge lesson that I learned from that experience. And then the other one was just being on the trains. Sometimes on the trains, you just see very interesting people and things. So as a kid, I remember going to work once again with my mom, and there was this like homeless, like I don't know if he was homeless, but he definitely was like he was kind of ragged it up, like Chinese guy who was reading the newspapers. And my mom whispered in my ear, she said, "Hey, so," she calls me Bob instead of Rob. So she, "Hey, Bob, so son, you see him right there? Like he's kind of homeless, and he's probably going to leave. When he leaves, he's probably going to leave newspapers here. So as a Chinese person, make sure that you're clean, make sure that you take care of everything so that you don't give the impression that we're dirty and we're disorganized and that we are not responsible for our own things." So I remember her saying that. And then as she's talking to me, there's these two dudes who look like they're like Wall Street looking finance people. And he just kept like snickering towards me and my mom. And they just couldn't get over the fact that she spoke with an accent. And just they just thought it was just like very hilarious and funny. Mind you, I'm still a kid at that time. I don't know how to, I wasn't articulate enough to say, "Hey guys, like, you don't know my mom. Like, she's way smarter and articulate than both of you guys will ever be in your life." Obviously, I can say that now, but at the time, I didn't know how to express that. And it was just very confusing for me because here my mom was trying to put this wisdom and knowledge to me of what it means to be a good Chinese American and to represent. Yet it feels like no matter if we are clean, no matter if we follow all the rules, we're not seen as human. We're always seen as foreign or as the other based on how we talk, based on how we looked. So growing up with that type of like really polarized, contradicting messages, I was like, so even if I speak perfect English, even if I follow all the rules, I'm still not American. And I learned that when I was in New York, and therefore all my life growing up, I never felt truly American. And we tried many things too. Like my parents actually sent me to a military school for eighth grade or ninth grade. And during that time there, it was the same thing where I was like, I don't fully feel like I belong. I knew that I was American. I had every right to be here because I was born here. Yet being an American means that we have the ability to run for president. Yet why do I feel like somebody could look like me or somebody could look at me and say, you don't have a right to be president. We cannot see you as somebody with authority or with power or to make decisions unless you were to join China or something. So these types of things have like just happened at certain moments in my life that were just very visceral and very vivid. And I'm not somebody who wants to just like always stick to my past, but there's no denying that my past has definitely affected how I think now in terms of, okay, well, what can I do now as an artist, as an actor to help push this conversation forward, not just for Americans, but all over the world, for just human beings in general. So we could all see eye to eye as one, because even if we have different skin tones, different eye color, hair color, we all bleed red at the end of the day. So we should be there for one another. So ultimately, that's hopefully what I can do. And yeah, that was a very long winded answer, but hopefully they answered your question with my upbringing at least. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And some of those early experiences, how have they shaped your ability today to embrace your identity?
Um, I think it helped that I grew up in New York City. I have met other Asian Americans from suburbs and from like really like white dominant cultures. And it seems like they're usually not as proud of their culture. They sometimes feel very shameful. A lot of them might not be able to speak their mother tongue, for example, or they might not want to make friends with other Asian Americans, for example. But for me, it was different because we embraced that. It was because it was all around me, like being around Chinatown. We see where we've been drinking bubble tea before it became popular, and before it's now called boba tea. Now, like we've been doing all this stuff. Like we've been eating sushi. We've had fried rice for a long time, and even in first grade, like my first grade teacher made it a point that on the day of Chinese New Year, hey, everybody who's Chinese, hey, bring some food over, and we'll all eat and we'll share this culture. So that part was awesome. And it wasn't just with Chinese culture too. It was also, hey, somebody from Mexico. Like there was one girl, she was from Mexico and she like was a transfer student and she'd never seen snow before. So on the first day when it was snowing, like our teacher legit just allowed her to just like look outside the window. So moments like that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And obviously at the time when you're a kid, you don't really think about it like, oh wow, this is awesome. You're just like, this is how it should be, right? But then you realize as you get older, what you're like, wait, this is not a universal experience because I have met Asian Americans who never felt that way, who never felt really whole and complete with being who they are. Then again, also, I am maybe a little bit more unique in the sense of that I am pretty proud of where I come from. I always say that my skin is golden and I'm proud and outspoken. Like that has been who I am. Just being able to look at myself, and I didn't grow up always thinking that way. I definitely had moments when I felt either embarrassed or shamed for being Asian, where people would say, "Oh, you guys eat dogs," or "You you're just super smart and that's all you're capable of doing. You're not good at sports," or as an Asian American guy, it's like, "Oh, well, you're never attractive. Like no one's going to like you and stuff. Like you're really ugly." So that has happened before too. But over time, as you get older, like once again, like those formative years definitely shaped how I felt and thought. And it took a lot of unlearning for me to be able to come to terms with myself. But theater, performing, art, that was my home for me to express myself. And big a big moment that I learned that was actually when I did go to military school, because over there is there's a lot of rules. Like there's certain things that you could express and certain things that you can't express. And I never think it's a good idea to just put a whole bunch of young boys or even men in one space for too long. It's just never a good idea. It's very toxic and destructive. But we were in those situations. So where I found a lot of my solace and home was listening to hip hop music and like really just like and writing and drawing. So and I felt it was really crazy that I was like, wait, I clearly don't live the same life as some of these rappers like Tupac or Eminem, like growing up in certain environments. I don't come from that environment fully, but I've seen it because I'm in New York. I've been around it in the sense of like I've seen where it is. It's not that far away. But I can relate to that, even though we look different, even though we come from different economic classes. And that was when I was like, okay, like something like music, something like video is so important to have. And I'm so glad that I was also born in a time where YouTube was around. So I started watching YouTube videos when I was in middle school, and that helped a lot because I know for a lot of older Asian Americans, like they didn't necessarily have role models or people that they could see on TV screens. But with the internet, you could just have a camera. You could just post it on YouTube. So I started following a lot of different Asian American YouTube artists, like people that I don't normally think could be seen on TV. I found them on the internet. So rappers, artists, poets, like all kinds. Like I'm talking about people like Dumbfounded, Timothy De La Ghetto, who's now Timothy Chadoransu, Niga Higa, Wangfu Productions. Shout out to all these guys. They don't know me, but I've been following them vicariously for years, and they definitely shaped my perception of what it means to be an Asian person, what it means to be an Asian artist and entertainer. So that definitely helped a lot. So that's why I am pretty proud. And as years went by, I started to partake in these communities as well, even at school. And after the military school that I went to a boarding school in New Jersey. It was in Princeton, New Jersey, actually. So there was a lot of white people there too, but we also had some type of diversity. We had international students. And for me being Asian American, I felt like I was kind of like a bridge to kind of connect like my international Asians with like those who were from America. But I learned a lot from those who were in Asia because all my life I just grew up in America. So I started listening to like Korean music, Taiwanese music, just hearing certain things. So I was like, okay, so I might not be able to see as many of people that look like me here in the States, but oh, they're flourishing over there in Asia and they're killing it. It's just that people don't know about them in America, but that's okay. Like I see them, I recognize like they're awesome. So once again, that also helped me with empowering myself. And I participated in like the diversity club in high school, and I've always been pretty active in those situations as well, like even throughout college. So yeah, that definitely all those formative years helped shape me to be where I am today. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did you have any specific moments or experiences that was kind of the turning point that really made you realize that your passion was for the arts and theatre?
Mm, good question. I would say there are two turning points. One was just the pure passion of it, and that was when I first stepped on stage. When I was in high school, after the military school, I went to this school called the Hunt School of Princeton. It's a private boarding school, and there weren't the student to teacher ratio is great because it's a private school. It's not like public school where like it's one teacher with like 50 students. Like it was there's a lot of attention given to every student, which I was very privileged and also very grateful for that opportunity. So one of my teachers, he was the choir teacher at the time, Mr. Mayo, and he just said, "Hey Rob, we're doing this new. Do you sing?" I was like, "I don't know. I sing in the showers, I guess." He's like, "Well, we're creating a new all guys a cappella group, and you should audition for us." So I was like, Okay, sure." And then I remember being at that audition room, and I sang "I'm Yours" by Jason Mraz, and I was just pacing around as I was singing. And okay, cool. Thank you for that audition. Can you do it again, but just don't move. Just stay where you are and just sing it. So I said, okay, I will. And I did it. And they said, okay. After that, they said I got in. And then we went through rehearsals. I enjoyed every process of that. And then the moment we went up to perform, I just remember being on that stage at school, the lights turning on, and I just felt whole. I felt so complete. I was like, I love this. And it wasn't about the attention from the audience. It wasn't necessarily the claps. It was just, I get to be up here and I get to express myself. Because growing up, I didn't really express myself in that way. There's a whole period of time in my teenage years where I didn't cry at all. A whole like 5 years, I didn't cry a single tear, not even from watching movies. And being on that stage, I was able to express a certain part of me that I was like, wait, this has always been there. It's just been untapped for so long. It's been meaning to come out. So I was glad that I had that experience, and then that led to doing theater. And once I started doing theater, I was like, okay, that's game over. I knew that I loved it, but I don't think passion is enough. I don't think passion alone is enough for somebody to take that leap into saying that I want to make this my life and my career. I knew this was something that I loved. I knew storytelling, writing, acting, arts was, I knew I loved it so much. But I had a lot of parental pressure and I had a lot of cultural pressure, societal pressure, even outside of being Asian American. Normally in a society, we're not going to look at somebody and be like, oh, hey, son, great, go ahead, be an actor. It's like, maybe you should reconsider things. Like, have you ever thought about maybe being like a business person, maybe an engineer? So that wasn't the first thing I thought of, even if I loved all those things. That's why I ended up going to business school. It really took this Asian American history class that turned my passion of, I just love it and I get to express myself, into something more of like, oh, wow, not only is this empowering me, this has the potential to empower other people. There's a deeper why as to the reasoning of why I'm getting into this field in the first place. Because you could say, I love it, I love it, I love it. It's great. But if you don't have that social responsibility, I think it'll be hard for you to really navigate society in your field, no matter what you do. You can say, I love money, great. But there's so many jobs where you could make money, right? And even still, you might not feel like going to work, because if it's just about making money, it's just about making money, right? Just like being an actor. I love acting, but sometimes the industry will make you feel lesser because of auditions, because you're not good enough. Therefore, having stuff like a why, this deeper purpose of like, I'm driven to do this, even if it will take me many years, because I know that ultimately my voice will be heard and my story will be told. And I'm here for a greater purpose outside of myself. And that was what that class helped me do. I learned so much from that class, and I'm forever grateful for my teacher and my student and all the classmates who were there, as well as my theater teacher back in high school. Like, all of this like helped so much into developing me into the person I am today. Oh, and shout out to my acting school, Stella Adler. Like, they have been amazing in terms of helping me turn what I love into something that's more approachable in terms of how do you look into characters. And it enabled me to look at human beings just as that, where even if I am a 24, 25-year-old kid from New York, I could play somebody who is a 40-year-old guy in New England who is an academic, right? Like, I had to do these types of characters. Or, all right, you have to be naked for this scene. You just have to do it. Oh man, I've never done this before. This is crazy. And then you do it, and then you realize, oh wow, like it's not as crazy as it seems. Like, I feel very empowered through the art, and then I also feel very empowered by my why as to why I'm doing this art, both for myself and for other people. And hearing those comments where it's like, hey, wow, keep going, or wow, I never seen somebody rap this story about this person. For me, it means the world. I made this one rap song in honor of Private Danny Chen. He's this unfortunately this 19-year-old kid who shot himself. He was a soldier in Afghanistan, Asian American kid, grew up in New York City, Chinatown. There's so much that I could relate to this kid. And I knew about his story for ever since high school, because he was just 2 years older than me at the time. I was 17 when I heard about his story. They created a whole street sign dedicated to him. It's called Private Danny Chen's Way, like in Chinatown. And every time I pass Chinatown, I always see his sign and I'm reminded of his story. But it's sad because I'm like, how many other people know about his story? So last year I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a whole rap dedicated to him. And I did. And it definitely made a couple more people open up their ears and their eyes in terms of, wow, I never even knew this story existed. So moments like that, I was like, okay, even if the world doesn't know me yet, like at some point they will. But even if they don't, I hope they at least see my work. I hope they can at least like see, oh wow, whoever made this song or this painting or this film, that was awesome. I never knew about this. Like this made me change my perspective about Asian people or about humanity or about how people operate in certain situations. So yeah, like things like that is very awesome for me. And that's why I keep doing the things that I do. And it's still a passion for me to this day. It never gets old. Yeah.
I would love to delve a little deeper into your work and more
Mm,
specifically your donation to MOCA. And one of them
mm,
is the poem that you performed at the Asian American Federation Vigil in March. So,
mhm.
could you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write and perform this particular work?
So the poem that I performed is more of a spoken word rendition of the song that I wrote called Carry On. So I wrote the song Carry On last year, sometime around October or November. And it's just from seeing these constant attacks from like just from anybody on my community. And it was just sad to see it. And for so many reasons, it wasn't just about the attacks too. It was just about COVID, like everybody stuck inside. Also me going through mental anxiety of being like, what's going to happen to the world? My all productions and TV shows and auditions have been put on hold. So who am I? Like having to tackle through different anxieties. So with between that in my career, between the world possibly ending to like hate crimes, to seeing like, and even before the hate crimes, like even seeing people not even going to restaurants, Asian restaurants, just because they feel like, oh, we could get COVID there, things like that, or seeing news of people getting deported by ICE, including Asian Americans too. Seeing all that, I was like, this is a lot to take in. How, what can I do to best carry on and move forward with this? So this is more of like a letter that I wrote to myself and to my community, where it's not some flowery message saying that, oh, hey, everything's going to be rainbows and ponies. You're fine. Don't worry. It's more like, hey, I'm here to address the reality of things. This is exactly what's happening right now. And despite all this, we need to have a little bit of hope because no matter how dark a situation is, how I put it is the brightest light shines in the darkest times. We could fully see how bright a light shines in the darkest of moments. So I wrote this poem, this song called Carry On way before it was even coined Stop Asian Hate. Like there was we've been doing this, like me as well as like, many other people in our community. We were already rallying. We already had protests like in the summer of 2020. And we just kept using our voice and finding different ways to do it. So for me, writing a song was one of those ways to tell our story, but also to empower and to just be there for my community and for myself too. Like sometimes I need that reminder. So when it came to the vigil in March, I didn't expect to go up and talk because it was mainly politicians or community leaders who came up to talk. They had designated time slots for them. So, okay, Senator Chuck Schumer came in, he gave a speech. Mayor Bill de Blasio, he came in, he gave a speech. There were other people from different organizations who came in solidarity, and it was cool. But there was a part of me that felt like it was a little performative. Like I wasn't sure if I could fully trust in what these politicians were saying, and I still don't. Which is why at some point I probably will run for Congress or run for mayor or president at some point. I feel like I need to because I don't want to see just these people just giving lip service. Like I know that if I'm grounded with the people and I'm real and I'm there with them, then I know they will support me and we will raise our voices together and it'll be more authentic. But for the time being, I was like, at that visual, I was like, it didn't feel sincere. And it also felt like it was more of a rally instead of a vigil. Like a rally is when people could be like, we are New York strong and nobody can mess with us. Like whoa, rally the people up. Um, or you'll get certain performers who will speak poems, and it's usually coming from a very sad emotional place where it's like, this is all these messed up things, fucked up things that happened to me, and yada yada yada. So you see these two extremes of like, yes, yeah, fight unity, and like sadness, my traumas here. And it was still a good visual. Like I saw all that, and I was like, but in my mind, I was like, damn, I really hope they open it up to the community. I really hope that they, at the end, that they're able to give some time for any community member to just come up and say something, and they did. So I wasn't expecting to perform. I wasn't expecting to go up. But the moment they said, okay, so for the last 10 minutes of the vigil, anybody could come up and they could say a few words, but please keep it short, keep it to a minute, 2 minutes maximum. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go up. I don't care. I'm going. I'm inspired by what everybody said. I just went there just to show support and solidarity because this is such a big event that happened in our community. It was just so shocking and horrific and sad. So I was just there to support. But the moment I started seeing how everybody's speeches were, I was like, I feel like I need to speak. It went back to my high school days of like that needing to express myself, the needing to convey some message out. So I was like, hey, do you mind if I go up? And he said, yeah, sure. And so I was like, okay. I went up. I was like, hi. I was a little nervous too because I definitely forgot my lyrics, my words at halfway point. Duh, because I didn't expect to go up. But I went up anyways, and I think that's what real courage is. Real courage is not I'm super bold and I'm Superman and I'm doing all this. Courage is like, in the face of danger, in the face of fear, even if you're scared, even if you don't feel fully prepared, you take that leap of faith. So I went there and I said, hi guys, my name is Rob. My last name's Chen. Chen's my last name, and I'm Cantonese and my skin is golden and I'm proud and outspoken. And like that's the first thing that I had to come out with because it's a sad time for everybody. Like we could either be angry, which is what I felt like was a lot of that, or really sad. And I want to give a little bit of sense of like, no, like I'm just an individual from the crowd. Despite all this, I'm still proud. You know, that also rhymed unintentionally, but it worked. So, um, so I spoke my poem, and yeah, it was just I just something just overtook me, and I just was really in it, and I hope that people were there. They paid attention, and they were like, wow, like this was something awesome. I felt it was an awesome experience for me, at least just to be able to express it in front of a giant crowd of people. At that point, like all the news media people already left, and that's how I knew that it was kind of phony because when the politicians were there, ABC News and all those people, they were there. Cameras were all over the place. By the time it was all over and it was just down to the community people, last 10 minutes, they all left. It was like late at night. Doesn't matter for me because even if I get to change one person's life, I'm changing their world and their perspective. So that's why I start off by saying like these days I cannot go to sleep without some heavy breathing. I see there's more policing. I look outside and I see people holding signs and shouting from the speakers. I think I need to take some time to get over my demons. So that whole section was just reflecting upon all that I was seeing through the protests. And I participated in these protests too, whether it's for the Asians for Black Lives protests or stuff that we did last year in terms of raising awareness about hate crimes. We did all that. And so I was like talking about that, but also feeling that anxiety of like, oh, I got to recheck myself. And then because it was still cold, I was like, it's in the wintertime, like it's winter season. Like bring out the Timberlands, it's winter season. That's a shout out to New York because if you're a New Yorker and it's wintertime, you best believe you better have some Timberlands on you. So because the snow and the salt and the slush, they could really damage your shoes. So you got to get yourself a pair of Tims.
Yeah. So
So
could
yeah.
I go back to that line, the needing some time to get over my demons? Could you
Yes,
expand on what that means to you?
for sure. Yeah. So I always felt that mental health is such an important part of everybody's life. But really the pandemic brought it to the forefront for me because it really brought out a lot of insecurities that I had about myself. One of them being my career. I was like, maybe at a certain age I should be successful or I should have made these accolades already at this age and I haven't. And now with the pandemic, I'm like, oh shoot, what's going to happen with my life? So confronting that was a big one. Intimacy as well. Like, okay, I've been single for like almost 3 years now. Am I ready to be able to open myself up to for genuine connection and and to open myself up for that? So like all these different insecurities coming up during that time of the pandemic, and it took me a while to come to terms with it and not just ignore it, but to really sit down with these demons, right? And to look at my demons in the eyes and be like, hey, look, I know you're here. In fact, you're probably always going to be there, but I'm going to acknowledge you first. And then hopefully I could use some of your demonic energy for inspiration, in terms of my art. And that's kind of based off of this anime show called Naruto. And it's about this kid. He has a nine-tailed fox demon in his body. But at some point as the series goes on, he learns how to channel the demon's like energy, the chakra to like help him like win battles and stuff. And he ends up befriending this fox. So it's the same way of like how I look at my life too, where it's like I have to first acknowledge that these things are happening in my life, these demons, um, and then I have to find ways to get over it and befriend it or come to terms with it. And through that, when I was able to do that, and there's still so many things to overcome. I'm not saying that I fully overcome everything, but going to therapy helps too. Like I started seeing therapy this year and just once a week, because if we're so open for physical therapy, then we should all be open for mental therapy as well, just for a checkup. So going through that, it actually helps me with my art too. It makes my art better. It makes me more creative and I feel more open to sharing things. I don't feel as scared to hold things back, like especially like personal things that could be hurtful for myself, like these insecurities. Now I'm like, I think I need to take some time to get over my demons. And I feel like a lot of people have to were confronting their demons too. Like during this time, I'm sure it was the same thing for you. Like, wow, like I was in the US, now I got to move somewhere else. I got to relocate and I'm back home and I don't feel like it's fully home and I can't wait to go back to the US. Like, why do I feel this way? Am I accomplished? Am I the scholar that I always said that I would be? Like, whatever that may be. And then we realize that these are just these images that we put on ourselves. Like, it's okay. We got to be patient with ourselves and we got to love ourselves. So yeah, that's like also a long-winded answer to that one line that you asked about. So yeah.
No, no, it's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. In the work, you make references obviously to COVID, stimulus checks, police, and racial violence.
Mhm.
Do you feel like the pandemic might have been a catalyst for you to start speaking out more loudly?
Um, I've been pretty outspoken prior to that, but I definitely think, but yes, the pandemic catapulted me into a whole different level. Like my friends who knew me for a long time, they always knew that I was outspoken and proud of who I am, and I would speak out on these situations. But when the pandemic happened, it was kind of like times five, where because all these situations just rose in such dramatic ways. And so I took it upon myself where I was like, okay, I don't have much of a following on Instagram. Like I only have like 2,000 something, but I'm going to use my platform to speak out on injustices with what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the hate crimes, like fighting solidarity, posting about it, like mentioning different things, like using my voice as just an amplifier for what is already happening. And so one of the things I did was I created a separate segment of a podcast. I was already a podcast host, but I reached out to the same crew and I said, hey, I want to pitch this idea. It's going to be called Black and Gold. And this is going to be a place where we find Black and Asian solidarity, especially in a time where I felt like there's a lot of tension between the Black and Asian community, especially with these hate crimes. So I want to show that, hey, we're not, yes, we have differences, but we could come together and we actually are a lot more similar than we think. So moments like that is where I really want to use my voice, like less so to be like, oh, you are wrong, I am right, but more so like, hey, we have this situation, we need to talk about it. Because at the time, people weren't really talking about these problems that were happening, at least in our community. I've been gaslit on both sides where I've had people say, why are you supporting Black Lives Matter? Don't you know that they're attacking our people? And then I had on the other side where it'll be like, well, why are you talking about these like Asian hate crimes right now? Like right now is not your time to shine. Like it's for the Black community to shine. I'm like, what does it have to be mutually exclusive? Like I grew up thinking that, like, we're human beings. So if there's any type of injustice, regardless, any type of, like, whether it's with black trans women, or with, like, um people who are about to get deported, like, these are things that we have to address, like, or even the stuff that's happening in Gaza or in Colombia. Like, we got to talk about these things, we got to mention it, at least bring it to light. I cannot pretend that life is amazing. I can't be one of those Instagram people who just post pictures of them out on the beach. Like, I'm not that person. I would feel very weird about it if I did. It wouldn't be genuine. So a big part about that pandemic was doing that, but also to give hope to people. So a big thing that my dad and I did was that we volunteered at the first COVID testing site in New York City, the first ever COVID testing site. And that was at, like, Wall Street. So we would wake up at 5:30 a.m. every day and go there. This is before we even knew what was happening. We just knew that there's something called COVID. We didn't know how people got it. We didn't know how to solve it or anything. Way before the vaccine, my dad would be wearing the PPE for like 6 to 8 hours at a time, and, like, I would just, like, be there, like, doing admin work, helping out. Like, I was just trying to help out the best way that I can, and that's kind of what we did. Like, and my dad also made it a point. He said, I need to bring other Asian volunteers because they needed to be able to see that we are not the problem. We are not the virus. Hate is the virus. We're not the virus. And so we got to show them that we are also here to take care of them and that we're there for them as well. Like, this is our time where we participate. If in the past people thought that we didn't participate, which is not true, Asian people did participate in civil rights movements. But now is the time where we could really do that on a much greater scale. So through volunteering, as I mentioned earlier, doing all these different volunteering groups, volunteering at COVID testing sites, participating in rallies and protests, trying to bring people in. I just made a bunch of signs, and I'll just bring like 5, 6 signs to an event, and I'll give them out to different people who might not have signs. Or I'll write poems, spoken word poetry or songs, and I'll perform them at these rallies to inspire people, because we're all here for the same reason. And everybody has a different level of how they're seeing things or how they're expressing things. And there's also a lot of people who don't know how to express it. Like, they just know they're feeling something, but they don't know how to articulate it in words. And that was something that I always had a trouble with when I was younger, when I didn't know how to articulate my thoughts. And it really took art, writing, performing for me to be able to articulate these thoughts. And this is me as somebody who's been doing acting and writing for so long. I'm imagining somebody who's just like, okay, I just stepped out of my office. I'm here at a rally. This is my first one. So I'm okay. I gotta give you guys some words, like, I gotta give you some words that you can feel empowered with, that you could take even after this rally, that you could teach your kids these types of things, like make videos about this. So the pandemic definitely made me a lot more outspoken, and I don't think there's any way for me to go back from that. There's no way. So I'm glad it did, because it's always in me, but it definitely took a little bit of a push to fully be out there and be like, yo, like, this is what I represent. I'm unapologetic about it. So we got to stand our ground. We got to be happy and proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your personal experience. What was it
Mhm.
like living in New York City during the pandemic?
Oh, it was wild. It was wild living in the pandemic, living in New York City during the pandemic. It was, growing up here, there's always so many people. It's always busy. That's why so many people flock to New York for opportunities, no matter what industry that you're in. Like, there's something for everybody. And when you're just seeing the streets empty, you can't help but to feel sad, like, dang, like, this is what it is. And stores closing down. Some of your favorite restaurants that you've been there for years are closing up. Mom and pop stores are closing up. And even big ones like Century 21 or um, Sephora, whatever, like, they're closing up too. And it's just a very sad sight to see. At the same time, like, it makes driving so much more convenient because there's literally no traffic over there. I was like, before, I'll be okay, I'll be on the BQE, and if I'm driving my mom to work, I'd be like, oh man, we were stuck in traffic again, man. Why are we in traffic? This is like literally 11 o'clock a.m. in the morning. We're still stuck in traffic, all going through the Brooklyn Bridge. And I was like, vroom, and it's like, I could get there in like 15 minutes rather than like 40, something like that. So that I always try to make light of the situation. I never try to, like, be too depressed about it, but I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of depressing to see everything shut down, to see Times Square completely empty, the city completely empty, to see Chinatown in shambles, where it's like Chinatown is one of the busiest places in Manhattan as well. There's street vendors, there's people just like haggling you for even, hey, you want to buy a purse, for 50 cents, from this like Nigerian man, whatever. Like nobody's around, like nothing. So I missed the life of New York. There's such a liveliness about New York and this sense of resilience, but when everybody's closed up and stuck inside, it was just a very sad time to be a New Yorker at that time. And then you see the news, and then you start seeing how crazy it's been in New York, and we realize, oh my gosh, it's crazy to a point where places like Elmhurst Hospital had to bring a whole truck. Like, I don't know if you've seen the news that there's a whole truck where they had to ice it, and that's where they put the bodies in because they didn't have enough place to even store the bodies in like their own hospital. They had to put it in a freaking truck. And we also there's also people that we knew who passed away too. One of my close friends, like aunt and grandpa, passed away within 2 days of each other. So it was just moments of that, and we have to be there for one another, So that's one thing that I think was great, was that you really started to see the humanity in people as well, like people helping each other out, people going on food drives, like supporting one another. So I would try to do that as well, like volunteer. That's why I volunteered so much. And how the pandemic just affected my community, my family's been all great. It's been huge too, because even before the pandemic happened, like people weren't going to Chinatown restaurants. They were just thinking that everybody who looked Asian were just like infected. So we were already suffering from that. And then with the pandemic, we started seeing these attacks. And that's when like shit got kind of crazy. And it also sucks because like there's so many cases where people don't even talk about it. Like they never report it, or even when it is reported, it's not considered a hate crime. So we had to take it upon ourselves to speak out. And this happened like there are so many cases that happen in New York City too. There are cases that happen all the time, but to see just an influx of more and more cases was just getting scarier and scarier. And I'll never forget the one where there's this 89-year-old Chinese lady who was like burned like in broad daylight at 4 p.m. This was in the same. This was in Bensonhurst. This is a neighborhood that my family grew up in. Like I spent my childhood around that area, and at the time during the summer, my brother was going to school there for to be an EMT. Like he's just going to school so he could be a legit a public servant for the city, like an EMT on the ambulance to help people. And I couldn't stop thinking about what if that happened to my brother as he's like walking down on the street going to class. Like he's doing something good for the community, and just based on how he looks, like this is what's going to happen to him. I cannot stand that. So we all rallied up, and with some community leaders, including um, Will X Ham, who's an actor, as well as China Mac, who's a rapper, all from New York, Asian Americans. Like we created something called "They Can't Burn Us All," which is like the first, like even before Stop Asian Hate, this is like the first like real like Asian led like rally for our people. And we're here to spread her story, the 89-year-old lady's story, saying that you can't burn all of us, like we're all here. And that was the first one. Like the first rally had like 200 something people, like it wasn't like that big, but then it started to grow, and it started to take shape in a much different way. So having those experiences and moments was really eye-opening and also empowering for me too, because we're able to see that despite all this darkness that we see, we're still here for our community. And if anything, it made our community stronger. It made everybody stronger. And that's why I think that's the beauty about New York, is that, and I'm sure many other countries as well, but I know for a fact, being a New Yorker, is like we're just a bunch of resilient people. Like if you're from New York, like people say we're rude, but we're not rude. We're just very direct. And not all of us are mean. There's a lot of love there too. And in those dark times, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's the pandemic, people show up at the right times in the right places. Like most heroes don't wear capes. In fact, in this time, most of them wear masks. So, we're all just there for one another. And that's what made like this pandemic, as crazy as it seemed, like a time where we could reflect and be like, what do I value in my life? Do I just value my career, or do I care about my community? am I willing to speak out about these things, even if it could mean putting my reputation and my career on the line, or do I not want to? And so you start to analyze that for yourself. And for me, I was like, it's a no brainer. I'm going to go out and I'm going to speak out about this. So,
Yeah.
and because of what I did, like my mom was first against me going to these rallies and protests. And then she went to one eventually. My parents went to one and I made signs for them because I couldn't go that day, but they went. So things turn around in the ways that they're supposed to.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what changes have you seen from before the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, and then now when it comes to how the AAPI community has been treated?
Mm. Um, I do have thoughts about that. So the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, I think for the most part, has been overlooked. We've been ignored quite a lot. And I always felt that growing up, that when it came to the conversation about race, we were just never included. It was always a black and white conversation for the longest time, and kind of still is. But now we're raising our voices about it. So pre-pandemic, like you don't hear about it. We're definitely not mentioned in the U.S. history textbooks. At most, it might be like two sentences on the Chinese Exclusion Act and maybe one paragraph on like Japanese internment camp. But aside from that, like you don't know. We most of us don't know anything about our community and our society and what we our contributions that we made, and therefore other people will look at us and think that, well, they're just here but we don't know too much about them, we just like their food, that's it, you know. And even within our community, there were a lot of people who still were not outspoken about these situations. And it was sad at first because I was like, yo guys, like this is a serious thing. Like even before the pandemic, I was like, yo, we got to raise our voices, like we got to do this, we got to do that. And I was just very contradicting because, like, as an actor, I'll get other Asian Americans who are not acting and they'll come up to me and they'll say, hey, man, love what you're doing. Keep doing your thing. Representation matters. Yeah, yeah, representation matters. And I'm like, this is just like a buzzword that people throw around in corporate America, just like the word diversity. It's just thrown around everywhere. Like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck about diversity. I care about inclusion, my guy. Like, give me inclusion and I will give you my best work. You give me diversity, I don't care about your diversity. You're just trying to meet a quota. You just want to put this black kid or this Asian kid or this Hispanic kid, like, or this woman, like, on your screen for a few seconds, and then that's diversity for you. No, it's not. You want diversity, you bring a woman as your director. You know, you get a person of color to write the script, or you get your producers, your executive producers got to be representative of that story that you're writing. So, but that wasn't the case prior to the pandemic. So within my community, there was a lot of this talk of representation matters, but I'm like, we will never get full representation until we get participation. We have to participate. We got to speak out. And so during the pandemic, that was when I started to see more people speaking out and participating. We've seen bakeries. There's this local bakery on Mott Street, and this dude, I believe his name's Kevin. I think Kevin. Oh man, I gotta remember his name because he was there at one of the rallies. Um, he was he was like giving out. He was packaging like 100, like over 100 meals a day just to give it out to people in the community, just out of his own pocket, out of for his own community. And he's just a small town bakery shop owner, local bakery shop owner. He's doing it for the community. So seeing people like them raise their voices, and then seeing more AAPI like celebrities doing it too, which before was always surprising for me because I always felt like once they have made it to a certain level of success, they would stop talking about these things. But then I started seeing oh, people like Sandra Oh and Daniel De Kim voicing out their concerns. And I'm like, finally, we got some clout behind us now. Like now people are talking about this. Because it's one thing if we were to talk about it, is another thing if, oh wow, this famous actor is talking about it, you know? And still to this day, not all of them are talking about it, but they're more so than not. There are more people who are. And there are a lot of nonprofits that came out of the whole pandemic. There's one called Send Love Chinatown, where they raised like thousands of dollars to support local businesses in Chinatown. And now they're switching up their approach, where it's more of a merchant discussion, where it's like, hey, we're here to give funding to certain communities that need to certain local businesses they need it, and we'll highlight them in our social media posts. Um, Websites like Nextshark, they've always been there for the AAPI community because that's their whole company is Asian and Asian American news. And they've been a huge contributor in terms of like, hey, these are the attacks that are happening, these are the current events that are happening, and here are some also good things that are happening too. They just went a whole wide variety of things. So you just started seeing like different Asian people using their voice to speak out, and we're starting to see a lot more different types of Asian people speaking out. Asian women, Asian men, like people in the LGBT community, immigrants speaking out, even if their English is broken, they're still speaking out. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. And so moving forward, now that it's kind of gearing towards the end of the pandemic, my hope is that people don't forget this moment, because we have many Asian American parents who are, for the first time now, talking to their kids about racism, and they're really teaching them. And I'm sure some of them also are fearful. And like once schools open, will my kid get bullied? Will they be mistreated and such? So I'm sure they're thinking about that. And because of that, I think a lot of people have already fundamentally shifted their mindset from, oh, I just care about money and my career and that's it. And now it's more of like, are you okay? What can I do for you? That is the hope, you know. Of course, I don't know if everybody is raising their voices and using their platform for the right reasons. I'm sure there might be some people who are just clout chasing, as we will call it, as the Gen Zers would call it. But regardless whether they're trying to get attention or not, like we are bringing attention to something that is very important, and it really has empowered people to all over the country and actually all over the world too. We have people from Korea, the Philippines, Japan, China, Taiwan also raising voices about this too. There was a TikToker who I met, and he wasn't even Asian. Like he was like Hispanic, and he would document all these TikTok videos of different protests, and he attended a lot of the Asian ones as well. And he said that yeah, like one of my followers is from the Philippines, and he like created a whole Roblox, like, so Roblox is like a video game. A lot of people play it, and so they did their own virtual protest where they created a space and they had like virtual, like digital signs like "Stop Asian Hate" all the way from the Philippines. So that's when I knew, I was like, wow, like this is global, just like Black Lives Matter. This is global. It's amazing to see like the unity all over the world about this. So my hope is that, number one, as the AAPI community, we don't look at ourselves as an isolated incident, and that hopefully people don't look at it and say, okay, well, now that the pandemic's over, everything's rainbows and ponies again. We're never going to get hit. We're never going to get hurt. No one's going to make fun of us. No, this is still happening. It will continue to happen. But the difference is how you react to it and how you can educate others so that they don't do this again. My biggest worry is that I'm going to grow up in a place where I'm going to be raising my kids and they're going to go through the same things that I went through. I don't want them to go through the same things that I went through. I never want to wish anybody that type of experience where they are either racially or sexually abused in any type of way. Like I would not want that for any of my children, because that would just completely strip them away of their humanity. And I want them to grow up feeling fully human all the time, because that's the most empowering thing that you can do, is just to be human. So that's why, like, I have hopes for my community. I'm seeing people raise their voices. More people are running for Congress and for different official, like, of office and stuff, and that's amazing to see. That's a huge one actually, because I remember I supported Andrew Yang, and I actually worked for his campaign in Iowa for like a whole month and a half. I campaigned for him, and you don't know how many times I would hear from Asian people in the API community say, I don't think America is ready for an Asian president, again and again and again. And I'm like, yo, why are we self sabotaging? We're doing this to ourselves. Like, we have the opportunity, so why not? Of course, time has passed. He not only did he not win the president, he also did not win the mayor election either. That's a whole different story. But through that, I was able to learn, like, okay, this is going to take a lot of time. This is not an overnight thing. Even this pandemic is not going to fully change how some people think. There's still going to be people in the AAPI community who might not voice out their concerns, who might still be conditioned into what they believe in. But over time, through education, especially, I have a lot of hopes for the youth that they're going to carry the torch for what we're currently doing. And hopefully they could be inspired by what we do. And I know that they're way smarter than us and way more capable than us, and they're going to do things in a way that we don't even know how to do. So that's the hope, is that like everything that they see from now, like I have two little cousins, like one's 7, one is 5. They went to one of the protests too, and like they're like little kids, they're little munchkins, and I was like, wow, I wish I had that when I was like 5 years old, 7 years old, where there's just a large community of just people coming together to voice out this type of racist incident that has happened. And they got to experience that at such a young age. They're able to hear stories, they're able to hear speeches from notable people. So they're going to grow up to in a world where they're going to become more articulate. Their vocabulary is going to be way greater than what I grew up with. I had to do everything on my own to figure things out. So, I mean, not on my own. I still had my family and friends that definitely helped. But in terms of the vocabulary usage, like you had to learn this on your own, the history and all that. So now we're starting to see Illinois just recently passed, like they're going to be including Asian American history in the public school system. First state to do that, Illinois of all places. It should have been New York, but I'm thankful that Illinois is doing that. So over time, we're going to start seeing more of these changes happening, and we're going to see a lot more unity, hopefully, between different communities as well, and participation. Once again, we can't get true representation without participation. So yeah, that was such a long answer. I'm sorry, by the way.
No, no, this is absolutely fantastic. And I'd also like to draw it into your song Carry On and
Mm,
kind of ask, I guess, what is the main message that you wanted to portray through
mhm.
that piece?
Yeah, so the main message is kind of what I mentioned before. Like, despite everything that's been happening, keep your head up. We got this. Like, don't let a racist incident, or don't let this like news or whatever natural disaster take away our humanity. That's why, like in the chorus, I say, life is more than what we see. I close my eyes, I'm on my knees. I pray for you and everyone, so please stay strong and carry on. I make a vow for you and I. I'll be right there if you gon' cry. I know it's hard, but life goes on. So please stay strong and carry on. So that's like the chorus of it, because it's like, despite all that, we need faith at the end of the day. And whether you believe in faith in the religious sense, the spiritual sense, or just belief, that's just what faith means. And it's different. Life is not all numbers. Like 1 + 1 = 2. That's very easy. There's a formula to that, but life is not a formula. You're gonna go through ups and downs, and you might not always have a solution. You might be very confused. The pandemic's been very confusing for everyone. So in this case, I want to be like, hey, like I'm gonna pray for you. Like I'll keep you in my thoughts and my prayers. Like, um, and I'm hopefully you're gonna pray for me too. Like I know that these times are tough, but please stay strong and carry on. So that's the main message about that. And there was that message for myself and as well as for my community. But even outside of the AAPI community, I feel like anybody can relate to a song like this, of just like overcoming those demons that you have inside of you, or whatever the news that you see, or just the insecurities that you have. Like we got this, and that's okay. And I do mention, like, the second verse has a lot more of the mental health aspect of it, where it sounds, it's more like, just promise me you'll stay alive. It's okay to cry. So it's like, um I'm trying to remember how I even like rapped it. It was like, just promise me you'll stay alive. I'm actually gonna write it down, because if we're gonna record it, I gotta make sure it's on record, because this is a part that I do think is very important for people to know. So it is, okay. Where is it? Carry on. All right. I have so many notes from my like, just from like writing down different things. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Duh. Okay, right here. Just promise me you'll stay alive. It's okay to cry. Just be honest when you say you're fine. I'm in no rush, so you can take your time. Life is rough and it can break your spine when it's dark outside. Please don't dim your shine. I hope that you can find a home inside these simple rhymes. So moments like that is like, it's all right. Take your time. I've had so many friends who had like mental breakdowns during this time, and like I felt that way too. And if I could be there for my friends, like I know that I will feel empowered just by empowering them. It's a win-win situation. So carry on is all about faith, is all about energy, is all about being there for one another. So hopefully anybody listening, you could take a listen to the song. It's a cool song, it's out there somewhere, even if it only gets 10 plays or if it gets 100,000 plays, regardless is that it's out there, for the world. And I wouldn't feel whole if I didn't express myself and at least leave a fingerprint or a footprint for people to reference back on. So yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Rob, and sharing your experience, your passion to speak out and increase positive Asian inclusion through your work as well. So thank you
Mm.
so much. And also thank you so much for MOCA for your contribution to the
Oh,
museum.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you to Mocha. Thank you to everybody. You guys are amazing. You guys are beautiful. You guys are doing great work. So thank you so much.